I've got Miranda Xafa. She's a former board member at the IMF. She's now a strategist at IJ Research based in Geneva. Miranda, tell me, should Greece, given the fact that the cost of debt hasn't come down that much, really be considering activating these loans?
Well, there's not much point prolonging the uncertainty. Spreads, as you said, are down this morning, but Greece is unlikely to get better terms than those that are on offer now. And tomorrow's T-bill auction will not be a conclusive test of market access because of the short maturity and small amount on offer.
Well, what about the bond sale and the proposed bond sale, the dollar-denominated one for the beginning of next month? Do you think it's not a good idea for them to try and raise that money?
Well, the funding needs in the next few weeks are about 12 billion euros, and I think Greece is unlikely to raise this amount on better terms than those on the table now.
Greece has got a huge problem now in terms of getting its fiscal house in order, while at the same time there's a risk of an economic slowdown. What's the next step for Greece here? Will it be able to do this?
Well, to reverse the explosive path of the debt, Greece needs to generate a primary surplus of 6% of GDP so that it can cover the interest costs without resorting to further borrowing. That's a swing of 9 percentage points of GDP compared to this year's 3% deficit, which is huge, but it's possible, certainly doable, and not unprecedented.
Let's just talk in further terms about the sorts of structural reforms that Greece needs to focus on. Where should the focus lie? What does it need to do longer term?
Well, those who advocate Greece leaving the euro area and wonder whether Greece can deflate itself back to competitiveness miss the point that private sector wages in Greece are quite low. The competitiveness problem stems from uncompetitive practices.
What sort of examples can you give me?
Well, I mean, there are barriers to entry in a number of professions like trucking. I was here for Easter, and we roasted the lamb for Easter using charcoal imported from Argentina, and we had vegetables and fruits imported from Belgium and from Spain, and I'm sure that has something to do with uncompetitive practices in the trucking industry, to give just one example out of many.
So do you think the government is actually going to be able to have the will to actually really attack these vested interests in order to actually, free up the economy so that it can start growing again?
Well, the government enjoys broad-based support and appears determined to tackle the structural impediments to growth in Greece. And of course, Greece will not be able to grow out of its debt problem unless it tackles these structural impediments.
So first of all, they've got to implement the austerity measures. Then they've got the structural impediments to look at. You mentioned just the ones to do with the trucking industry. What other examples are there out there?
Well, for example, profit margins are set by law in a number of professions: wholesale, retail, trade. Pharmacies enjoy a 35% profit margin over wholesale prices, and that's a heavy burden on the public health system.
Has the government already indicated that it's actually willing to try and attack these areas?
Yes, they've been talking about addressing the closed shops and adopting the services directive of the EU, and in fact they've even talked about going beyond the EU services directive to areas like trucking that we talked about just now.
So the government has outlined that it actually wants to do this. Do you think that the people in Greece will follow through with the support once it actually starts to put the measures in place?
Well, I think people understand that the situation is critical and that it cannot be business as usual. But, it would be to everybody's benefit in Greece. It would be to the benefit of the population at large if these structural reforms are finally implemented.
Well, just on a personal note, how confident are you that Greece is going to be able to tackle all the issues, including the austerity package in terms of the budget deficit, but also the longer-term goals of freeing up the economy?
Well, the rescue package that was just agreed by the Eurogroup addresses the short-term liquidity issue or crisis. But there is still a solvency problem out there that needs to be addressed by significant further fiscal tightening and by the structural reforms we talked about.
So, Miranda Xafa, thank you very much indeed.